pillars that were around there were probably about waist high, and there was a cluster of crystals on each one of these pillars, a beautiful cluster of crystals. There was white, there was pink, green, blue, smoky color, reds, greens, various colors. And I was just fascinated with these beautiful crystals that were around on the room. And being a rock hound, I was very much more interested to know the composition of these crystals. And in the very center of the room, there was a very large podium. It was about chest high, and it had a slope on the top part of it, and there was a book there, a very large book. And this book may have been about 2.5 feet high and maybe 2 feet wide. And the cover of the book was stone. It was about 1/2 inch thick, and it was probably, the best way I can describe it, was jade. It was carved. And you took this front cover of the book, and you lifted it up and you turned it over, and inside were the pages of the books. And the pages were a very thin foil like gold, and there was raised lettering on the pages. So when you read the book, you didn't read it, you felt the book like you would Braille. So I took the first page and I read it with my hands. I moved my hands all over the first page, and then I lifted the page up and I turned it over, and I read the next page with my hands. It took me probably about 20 minutes to read the whole entire contents of the book. And the contents of my book was retained within my subconscious mind. And after I returned to Earth, the material that I had read or absorbed during this period of time began to seep into my conscious mind, and I began to write this information down on loose leaf notebook paper. And it took me 5 years to finish recording all of the information. So I have a book that's 5 inches thick with all the material written down on loose leaf notebook paper. So after I went to the room and I read the book, they took me over to another place. By they, I mean there was probably 5 people that were with me at this time. And there was a pit there, and the best way I can describe it, it was probably about 12 foot long and about 6 to 8 feet wide, and there was stairs going down into this pool. Looked very much like a baptismal pool, and down in the bottom of this pool there was a liquid, and this liquid was pretty thick. It probably had the consistency of cream of wheat, and I walked all the way down the stairs and immersed myself in this liquid. It was a purplish color liquid, and when I came back out, this stuff rolled off of my skin like mercury. It didn't feel wet, and they told me that this is a process of removing any residual karmic free radicals that might be in my emotional body. And after this experience of cleaning up my etheric body, I went back to the pyramid. I don't remember anything else between that time and going back in the pyramid. And I remember coming into consciousness, and I remember the cat people that were in there leaving, and I remember that the room got dark, and I knew that I had to leave. And I got out of this sarcophagus, and I moved down to the outside of the pyramid. And I got outside. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was able to get a taxi very quickly that took me back to my hotel room so I could be with the tour. So after this experience that I had inside of the Great Pyramid, I definitely knew that my consciousness has shifted. I also knew that the emotional blocks that were within my auric field, I knew that there was some that I did need to remove, and so for the next year or so I was engaged in that, and I had a very wonderful euphoric experience after I got back to work and so forth. And for about 3 weeks I was in this state of euphoria, and I had to consciously bring myself down, because it's sort of dangerous if you're not in your body and your mind is somewhere else. And at the time I was operating heavy equipment, so I did need to pay attention to what I was doing. And as a result, after this experience in the Egyptian pyramid, there was a time in my life where I spent 17 years of research and solitude, and I was working in the copper mine there in my hometown in Baghdad. I had a job and I had an income coming in, so with the money that I was received from my job, I was able to go to various places and investigate certain things that were of interest to me. And I did this. I went to many different places, not only in United States, the power places in United States, but in some of the foreign countries, to South America and Japan and Europe and England. And I never got to Australia, which I would like to do that someday. And I never got to the Antarctic. I would like to do that someday. But I did travel to Alaska, to a spiritual city in Alaska. And the spiritual city in Alaska is in a place that is very protected. The weather in there is very mild, and the weather is anomalous in there. Normally we think of Alaska as tundra and ice and snow, but this one canyon is very protected. So I was able to go there and visit with the people who had lived in this part of Alaska for a very long time. They're very spiritual people. And I spent some time with these spiritual people, and they were connected to another spiritual school that was in the northern part of Japan. And through them I was able to travel to the spiritual city in Japan. And the spiritual city is not known to the general public. And as a result of my friendship with these people that were in Japan, I was able to travel to a spiritual city within China, to a place that is very well protected and it's not known to the world in general. And I was able to travel to many other these various places, and I do keep in contact with the people from these spiritual schools, and I do am able to keep contact through dowsing, and I do use dowsing rods in my work because dowsing rods do act as an antenna for grounding. So when the people from these various locations wish to communicate with me, very often I will hear a slight popping sound in the room that I'm in. It sounds like an electrostatic spark. And with the help of the dowsing rods, I'm able to establish